Welcome to episode 39 of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Planning your dream trip in 2025 doesn't have to be overwhelming. In this episode, we'll guide you through the key steps to turn your travel dreams into reality. From choosing the perfect destination to booking smarter, you'll hear insights from 3 seasoned travelers, a Brit, an Aussie and a Yank, with tips to make your trip unforgettable. So grab a cuppa and get ready to plan your best trip yet. Hi and welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Collins, who with my expert guests will take you on a weekly journey to destinations around the globe, providing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, practical tips and more to help you plan your next travel adventure. Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 39 of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Now, as I promised at the end of last year and in episode 36 at the beginning of the month, at the end of every single month, there's going to be myself, my friend Melissa, and my friend Shelley, who are going to be here sharing our top travel tips and doing a deep dive into particular areas of travel that you may be finding difficult. So, this episode, we are going to do a little bit of a chat about how we plan trips. So hi, Melissa. Hi, Shelley. Great to have you with us again.
Hello. Hello. How are you?
Great. Now, you guys are in Australia and I'm at the moment in Edinburgh. So we're literally on opposite sides of the planet. So how are things in Oz at the moment?
Warm. Yes. Lovely. Very warm. And it's a great time of year. I love it.
Well, we've had snow in Edinburgh and we have snow forecast for this entire weekend. So we'll see how that goes. So it's a complete change.
Yeah.
So we're excited to hear where you guys are planning to travel to in 2025. So you can now leave us a message on SpeakPipe and we can get back to you. If you leave your email and name, we can actually reply to you on SpeakPipe. So let us know where you are planning to travel to in 2025. Now, this episode, our goal is to do a high-level look at how to plan your perfect trip in 2025. So we're going to chip in, all 3 of us, with what we do, how we plan, and hopefully give you loads of tips and ideas so when it comes to sitting and planning your trip for 2025, you don't feel too overwhelmed. So let's start off with why. Why is planning important for a successful trip? And what is your planning style? So do you want to start, Melissa?
Yeah, okay. Well, I am quite a structured, organised planner. But I probably travel a little bit different to Tracy and Shelley in that I probably travel for a couple of weeks to maybe most a month at a time. So in my view, that is a short period of time. And so to make the most of my travel experiences while I'm overseas or within Australia, whatever it might be, I do tend to plan quite a lot of my trip. If it's a sightseeing trip, if it's a beach holiday, I might not plan so much. But yeah, generally I plan a lot of sort of quite structured sort of trip.
And what about you, Shelley, when it comes to traveling? Because you travel for slightly longer.
Yes. I usually plan my trips far out. That being said, I don't plan too much. I'm not so structured. I usually find that I plan 3 pillar structure points per year. So that be it a conference, that be it an activity, that be it a site that I really want to see, a bucket list. And then I will fill in from that point.
So you basically choose your kind of main events that you want to attend or do during that year and then fill in around that. So do you tend to, for at the moment, you're in Australia at the moment, Shelley, so you're going to be here for a few months, I believe. So are you kind of planning things, or did you already plan things before you arrived in Australia, or now that you're there, are you taking advantage and thinking, where can I go to?
So that being said, I did not plan on being in Australia. That was serendipitous. That speaks to my point to having a little bit of wiggle room and being open. But I did plan on being in southern Italy for the olive harvest and covering that for that season. So that was one of my structured points for the year. I also have a structured point for Quebec, Canada later on this year. And I also have a structured point for being in Sri Lanka for this upcoming couple weeks. So I kind of fill in and leave myself open to opportunities that come about, and Australia was an opportunity.
Ah, perfect. So you have a bit more flexibility, I guess. And for myself and Doug at the moment as well, we're quite flexible until May because he's on long service leave from his job in Australia. But we have not planned past the middle of February. We are busy planning at the minute. So we've looked at Central America, we've looked at Europe, we're starting to look at Sri Lanka. So we're probably 6 weeks ahead. And I do know we have friends who have this whole 12 months ahead planned out. Very, very clearly, they know on the calendar exactly where they're going to be. When it comes to deciding where to visit, Melissa, how do you do that? Because I guess that's the next thing. Once you've decided, you need to plan, think about how you're going to plan, how you plan, as a person, because some of us are far more structured than others. Some are more flexible. Again, it depends, I guess, on your circumstances, whether you've got 10 days off work, whether you're like Shelley and able to travel as a retired person longer term. So how do you actually choose, Melissa, when it comes to you planning a kind of, a month away or 2 weeks away?
It depends. Like, I mean, if I'm planning like a trip with my family, it'll go, oh, whether it's school holidays, where do my family want to go? If it's only like 2 weeks, then what's acceptable for a 2-week trip? But then on the other hand, I do a lot of solo travel. Well, I say solo travel, but a lot of the time it's meeting up with my fabulous friends like you guys. I do plan trips around conferences as well. Opportunities do come up in our industry that I might jump at. Sometimes I might just see a really awesome airfare or a great deal, and I'm like going, yeah, I'm going to be in on that. So it kind of just depends. I'm going to say generally I have an idea of maybe 10 places I'd really love to go to this year. And if the opportunity rises, if a good airfare comes up, if the time arises, then I might pick a couple from that 10. I won't necessarily get through that 10, but if all the conditions are right, then I'll choose. So I don't know if that answers that question. It's a little bit flexible, but it does depend on timing, budget, who's coming with me. Yeah, it depends on a few things.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So when you decide on a destination, what is the first thing that you do? So I know at the moment chances are that myself and Doug are going to do a rail trip. We're going to go from Portugal and go to Istanbul as part of this trip back because we're heading back to Australia for May. So we kind of looked at that. So we've got a starting point and an end point for that particular trip. So we're now starting to look at the destinations that kind of fit in along the way, the ones that appeal to us. So when you're choosing your kind of first destination and then kind of what you want to do past that point, do you look at, say, for example, do you look at a country or do you look at a particular city and then build around that? How do you choose?
The way I choose, I don't know if this answers the specific question that you're asking, but the way I choose a destination or how I choose a place I'm going is I look first at the exchange rate. I don't know if everyone looks at that, but as a solo female traveler, that is so important to me because I have to budget for myself. So what I do is, like Melissa, I look at the top few places that I really, really want to travel to. And then I look at the exchange rate. And if, let's say, the euro is not to my home country's currency doing so well, but let's say maybe the baht or maybe the rupee or whatever is doing much better, or the Aussie dollar is doing much better, then I will go ahead and move down that list or move up that list, and I will go to that destination because ultimately that is better for the travel experience because you're less stressed about the financial impact that it's going to have on you when you arrive at that destination. It's also your accommodations. It's also if you want to experience any cultural events. So, like you were speaking about you and Doug taking the train, going to Istanbul, that could be quite costly if the exchange rate isn't, good.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a solo female traveler, that is one of the main factors I look at before I choose a destination and start planning my trip.
That's good. And I guess that kind of covers that question of the research. And I know myself that we do look at obviously costs, because that is important. And I think, for most people, we have to consider how much it's going to, and especially if you're traveling for a longer term like we are at the moment as well, as kind of balancing that budget. I also look, as I've been looking at Central and South America at the minute as well, it's kind of looking at what is the best time of year to visit these places in terms of weather as well is important, because you don't want to go somewhere where it's just going to monsoon the entire time that you're there. Also, like you say, looking at particular events that may be happening. And obviously we have that a lot in the UK. People may come over because they want to go to the Chelsea Flower Show, or they want to go to Wimbledon, or they might want to go to Grand Prix or something like that. So that will kind of dictate when they're going to visit. And I think that's important when you're kind of considering what destination you want to go to. But also during your research, it's good to have a look, because you actually may want to avoid going at that particular time of year as well. So I think that's important. So obviously I'm going to say, when it comes to research, I will look at our website. Obviously the podcast as well, we have got destination specialists coming on, and we already had last year talking about destinations across the world. We've had France this month, Japan, we've got Peru coming up, we've got traveling with your dog, we've got lots and lots of different specifically destination specific and travel tip based podcast episodes. So those are really good to look at. So what else do you guys do when it comes to actually researching your trip?
Well, like you guys have just said, I've actually never looked at currency, Shelley. So that's really interesting. I think maybe as an Aussie traveller, I just know that my currency is going to do terrible against most currencies. So I just kind of expect it's not going to be good. So maybe that's why I don't look at currency. I think there was a really small window of time where the Australian dollar was better than the US, like literally like maybe a week or two. And I just couldn't organise that trip. But probably the first thing I normally do is airfares, because believe it or not, airfares are, like, particularly when you're in Australia and everything is a long, 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 long away. You can go to, let's say, America, and you can pay $1,200 return, or you can pay $5,000 return. Yep. So that's going to really decide it for me. If the airfare's $5,000, I'm not going. Like, I'll wait until I can get it cheaper. I mean, as probably some of you know, I'm a mad point hacker anyway, so I probably wouldn't pay for it anyway. But airfares are normally such a big chunk of a trip when you live in a place like Australia. Next is probably accommodation is going to be your next big expense usually. So I'll start looking at that, and I'm a bit of a budget kind of traveller, so I do my research on that, and I book it in. But I book in places where I can cancel. The reason why I do that is because the next thing I look at is what I want to do there, and I kind of start putting the itinerary together. And so you might have went, oh yeah, I want 3 days in Paris, let's say. But then once you start kind of looking at what you want to do in Paris, you might decide, actually, what I want to do really needs 4 days in Paris. And if you've locked yourself into 3 days and you're like, I've got to cut something out, it's kind of ridiculous. If you're coming from Australia and you're going to cut something out for 1 day, that's just mad. So that's when I'd jump back in and I'd adjust whatever the accommodation was. So that's how I normally do it. Airfare, accommodation, but flexible accommodation, and then what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well, because I think we always book cancelable accommodation, because you just, as you say, you need some flexibility at some points as well. And when you're doing that initial planning, that's very easy. And we do a lot of travel consults, itinerary consults for the UK, and we're starting to actually do consults around Europe as well now. And we find that people will put too much in, or they underestimate the travel time between A and B, and actually how tired it can get you.
That's right.
Yeah. And even you think last month, Shelley, we travelled from the southern part of Italy, from Puglia up to Florence. Well, that took the best part of a day.
Yes.
So you can't plan a huge amount the rest of that day in Florence. We didn't do a huge amount because we didn't have the time. And also it was quite tiring, even though you're sitting in a first class train or whatever. It's still, by the time you get there, it's actually, even for me as a very experienced train traveler, it's still the stress. You've got to get yourself to the train station, you get on the train, you've got to get off, then you've got to find your accommodation. Now I plan all of that quite meticulously because there's nothing for me more stressful than getting off a train and not knowing where my accommodation is. So I book accommodation always near a train station. So that's something that Doug and I are looking at now when we're looking at the travel, because we'll do everything by train. Going from Portugal over to Turkey, we'll do that by train. But again, we're looking at what costs at different destinations. We're looking at Airbnb options, looking at hotel, that flexible options that we can have. And as you say, if you lock yourself in sometimes too tightly, you end up then kicking yourself because you've missed something that you really want to do. I guess that also leads me on to the question of kind of, when do you make your bookings? Because like at the moment, we're busy planning our itinerary and we'll start kind of looking at locking in the accommodation, flexible accommodation, and looking at kind of the trains and adding everything up cost-wise. And we're already talking about going, in 6 weeks' time until the end of March, probably. And we haven't even looked at airfares yet to Sri Lanka or anything. But when do you start? Like, how far in advance do you book those things?
Well, if I could speak to that. So, as a solo female traveler, I always make sure that I book my first night's accommodations. And like you, Tracy, I always make sure I book it solidly, either by a train station, make sure that I book it if I'm staying in a city center. I make sure that I have transport to, especially if I come in a late night flight. Safety first, over money, safety first. So that being said, I always lock that in. After that, after the first night, or even the second night, depending on how long the flight has been, to Melissa's, if you're flying from Australia, if you have a super long flight, you may want to give yourself 2 days. But after that, I always find the most important thing in planning a trip is your documents, your plane ticket, and those first night's travel, and how you're getting to and from your accommodations those first nights. And if you have to plan in advance, like we did in Florence, the Domo David tour, or if you're going to the Vatican, or some tour that, or if you're going to Paris and you have to do some kind of museum that you have to book way far in advance.
Yeah.
Those are important. But other than that, you can always find accommodations, whether it's Airbnb, a hotel, booking.com, a B&B. You can always find accommodations. I think people put way too much emphasis on accommodations. And that goes to Melissa and your point of locking yourself in to those accommodations and not giving yourself enough wiggle room in case you need a plus day or a minus day if you're tired, if you need a down day, if you get sick. There's a lot of variables when you're traveling. And so that's one thing you can always get. It's not like a plane fare. You can always find a place to stay.
I know. Well, I'm gonna now contradict you now, Shelley. Okay. So no, and I think you're right. I think majority of the time you can, and I know there's kind of a lot of movement to have that kind of flexibility. I will just say, based on my experience of some places in the UK, for example, the Isle of Skye, it can be very difficult to get accommodation if you leave it. So It's exceptional. It is exceptional, but there are some places where you may struggle. But again, you've got to look at the time of year that you're talking about.
Yes, so, I do agree with that. If you're at high season, even let's say in Italy or whatever, if you're in June or July or August in Italy and you want to book an account, Absolutely. You're 100% right. But you will pay a price, but you can find it.
That's true.
Yes,
You can find it, but you'll pay a price. Yeah,
it.
yeah. And school holidays. I was going to say, as a family traveler, school holidays really important. You're going to pay a really big price.
Yes.
In Australia, like around a beach, if it's school holidays, people book a year out.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and I think that's part of the research part of when you're planning, which is why on my UK travel planning website, on my London travel planning website, I have guides to how far in advance and what to book.
Very good.
Because, for example, if you're coming to Edinburgh in high season, if you're coming in August, you need to have already booked. If you want to go to the Edinburgh Tattoo, if you want to go to Edinburgh Castle, you need to be thinking about that. Some particular restaurants and things like that, you do need to have that. But that's not everything. But some of the key things you may need to think about, again, depending on when you're traveling. Because, when the whole of Europe goes on holiday, you'll be in London and you'll hear every nationality on everybody will be there from all over Europe, all over and so, for those really popular destinations, Isle of Skye is completely taken off over the last few years. Everybody wants to go to the Isle of Skye. So it's incredibly busy during that peak season. So booking restaurants is something you need to do. So I think, again, but that's hugely part of that when you're doing that research. You look into that. So when you've got everything booked, you know what you're doing, you've got your itinerary planned. How do you prepare? So one of the things that I always do, and you kind of touched on this, Shelley, actually, is that I always, if I'm landing at an airport that I am not familiar with, in a country I am not familiar with, I will always have a pickup service. I will always have a driver meet me with my name on a card to take me to my accommodation. That is something I don't ever scrimp on, ever.
Yes. It's well worth the money. It's nothing. Safety is always priceless. So if exactly what you said, if you have landed someplace where you have never been before, do not skimp on that. Now, the next day, you have fresh eyes. It's light. You can explore. You know everything. Maybe on the trip back, you're fine. But that first night, no, especially if you're alone, solo female traveler, safety is number one.
Maybe it's my turn to contradict.
Yes.
Maybe being a more budget type of traveler, I don't mind the adventure. I don't mind the excitement of getting somewhere. And like if I've done and this also comes back to having done the research. If I've done the research and it appears that, there's a train station nearby, it's easy to get a bus shuttle, I'll do it. I mean, I went to Spain last year on my own and I landed, I think, at midnight. And being an Aussie, my money doesn't get me far in Spain. And so a transfer was going to cost me crazy amounts of money. So I did it. I got a shuttle and I got in the city at 1 a.m. Look, I'm going to be honest, I was a bit nervous, but, there was a lot of people out. It was a weekend, lots of people out, and I got to my hotel fine. But I had done the research. I didn't just randomly turn up at the airport. I had done my research, heard that it was very safe, that the shuttle bus will turn up, you'll be fine, and I did it. I wouldn't have just turned up without any knowledge whatsoever.
But to that respect, you did the research because Spain and Portugal is it's like one of the number one safest countries for solo female travelers, up there with Japan and with the Netherlands. It's one of the top tier ones for solo female travelers. So you did do your research.
Yeah.
It's so. Yeah.
But I find it a bit kind of fun trying to get to a place going. Where's the train station? Where's the shuttle bus? How do I get around? I kind of find it a bit fun.
I've got to that point in my life, Melissa. I just go, no, too stressful. I get on the plane, and from when I got on the aeroplane, I just know everything is planned for the other end, and I don't have to worry when I get off. I'll get off the flight. Saying that though, when we landed in Rome, because we were in Rome last month, and I went with a friend, the guy was about half an hour late, which did freak me out slightly, because again, I was like, well, this isn't what I paid for, but it was sorted out in the end. Now, other things obviously that you need to do when you're preparing is, you're checking that if you need a visa or if you need an air Meta or ETIAS or all these new lovely things that have just come in. Need to check those. If you need any vaccinations, make sure that you get all those done. Money now, I have a Wise card, and that's what I put my money on. Everybody, that's not financial advice. That's just what I use. That's how I find it's very easy because I have multiple currencies on that. I've literally just traveled, I think it was about 8 countries around Europe over the last, in December, and had about 4 different currencies, because not everybody uses the euro in Europe. So everybody thinks they do, but they don't. In Sweden they don't. In Finland I don't think they did. Poland they didn't. Hungary they didn't. Or maybe Finland did. But anyway, there's lots of different currencies. So having the ability to move it around was very easy. So those sorts of things. What about when it comes to packing? And I know we're going to do an episode about kind of our biggest packing mistakes and our biggest packing kind of tips. Now, I love compression bags, but I'm quite a light traveler because for me, having too many bags equals too much stress.
I agree, Tracy. Like, too many bags, too many things you can lose, too many things you don't know where they are. But look, even at home, I'm a bit lazy. I don't do my hair very often. I don't wear the most fanciest clothes, so I just don't need them when I travel. Like, I just came back from 2 weeks in Bali. I took 3 dresses with me, and that's it. And I can see Shelley she's going to say something different. But
she is.
I took 3 dresses for 2 weeks in Bali, and I probably wore one of them most of the time. And the other 2 I just put on when that one was a bit too dirty. So, but you know what? Like, when it's time to pack, there's none of this get up an hour early to pack your bag. It takes me 5 minutes to put my stuff in my bag, and I'm good and I'm gone.
I have to say, we travelled around India last year, the 2 of us, and we did really well.
Oh my God, Tracy! I thought I was a light packer, but you were like to the extreme. Your bag was so tiny. And you're a makeup, doing your hair, new earrings kind of girl. So hats off to you.
I know exactly what I need to take, and I just take that lipstick, that cover up, it's literally 1 or 2 of each. Now, Shelley, I think you're slightly different. Come on, spill the beans when it comes to packing.
When we went to Florence, Tracy, it was funny. Tracy,
she had a little backpack, no doubt.
Well,
and you had a suitcase.
I was very proud of myself. I had a backpack also. I was very, very proud of myself.
So what was it, 60 litres?
Yeah, so that was my skincare.
No, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Shelley, you need, shall we say you have to have more with you. So how do you manage because you're not quite as light a packer as myself and Melissa. So how do you do it?
No. So I travel, and I'm a solo female traveler. So I travel with a middle-sized suitcase and a carry-on. So
reasonable.
That is what takes me all year long. So I'm quite proud of that. There's many of taxi drivers that wonders how I can lift that and challenges me. But I say that's my workout. But yes, so I require a little bit more. I'm not quite as a light packer, but I would say I'm not an overpacker.
No, that sounds reasonable.
Yes. I like a little bit extra, just a little bit. I'm more of a, like, I came for a weekend and I have like maybe 4 dresses and a couple pair of shoes. I like choices.
I was just going to say, I picked her up today and she had just a backpack and I thought that was pretty good, but there's 4 dresses in there.
So quick question then. Packing cubes, yes or no?
Yes, I use packing cubes, but I guess I will save my secret hack for the packing episode. Because this secret hack changed my whole compression packing cube thing. I can get 25 outfits in a compression packing cube.
Oh, okay.
No,
I'm interested.
right. We need to see this on video as well, Shelley.
Yes,
We're going to talk
video.
about this in the podcast. So if you are listening now and you think, oh my God, I really struggle with packing, this episode that's coming up with Shelley, I don't know which month it's going to be. I will let you know. This is going to be the one to listen to and the one to watch. I'm fascinated by this.
Me too.
Okay, so we've had a kind of general chat about how we plan, and we are going to go in future months, as I say, talk more deeply and more in depth about how we choose accommodation, how we look at booking flights, travel. Point hacking is something that you're a specialist in, Melissa. So that'd be great to talk about how to keep yourself safe as a solo female traveler, which, Shelley, you are the queen of this. You have so much experience. It's going to be fantastic. But I'm going to end this episode and I'm going to do a bit of a rapid fire. So I just want your first thoughts on these questions. So what's the biggest mistake you've seen travelers make? Melissa?
Packing too much clothes.
Shelley?
Overscheduling themselves during the day, packing too much in.
Yeah, I agree with that. And not doing enough research, or having experts like us help them with their itineraries. If you could only plan one thing in advance, what would it be, Shelley?
Plane ticket.
Melissa?
I was going to say plane ticket too. So I'm going to say now accommodation.
Okay, cool. What's one thing you've learned to always do when planning, Shelley?
Make sure you know how long you can stay in the country.
Perfect. Melissa?
Oh, that got me thinking. The visas and stuff. You mentioned that before, and I was just going to say, just because you went there last time, don't think that that's the same. I made that big mistake. I know you wanted just one thing, but I made a mistake like that before too. It changes all the time. Look, every time.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Oh, well, great. It's been absolutely fantastic to catch up with you guys this month. We have got to decide what we're going to do at the end of February for our deep dive. Now, if you're listening to this episode and there's something that resonates and you think, I want to hear more from Shelley, Melissa, and myself, Tracy, about one of these particular aspects, leave a message on SpeakPipe. Let us know what you want us to help you with, because honestly, you have got three, let's say it again, travel experts from the UK, from Australia, and from the US. Like, how often do you get three women with this amount of experience and knowledge of travel in one place? So utilize us, guys. Now, you can find links to all our websites, our social media, in the episode show notes, which are at globaltravelplanning.com/39. But I just want to say, guys, thanks so much for joining me for this episode. As always, it's great to chat with you.
It was fantastic. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
And that leaves me to say, until next week, as always, happy global travel planning. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app, because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.